Well, good morning. It's Tom McLeish here of the eClass project and also of the University of York. First thing to say is congratulations on the Science in Congregations project. Also, I'm delighted that Ruth Ogilvie has asked me to just say a few words on the background, philosophy, theology, perhaps, of what Christian stewardship of creation might mean. I've thought a lot about this. I'm a physicist myself, as well as dabbling in a bit of theology as a lay reader in the Church of England, and having engaged with the project and with my colleague David Wilkinson at Durham and others. And as a scientist who has spent now, 20 years looking at the physics of living systems, of biological systems within plants and animals, down to the smallest molecular length scales, to try and understand how the wonders of life work. It's been a great joy to be able to reflect biblically on where the motivation for this all comes from. So briefly, because we only got a few minutes, I thought we'd do a scamper through just a few key passages that thread together a storyline in the Bible, which is more or less continuous or pops up from time to time within the theopolitical story of God and Israel and the land and salvation history. There's another co-continuous theme throughout the Bible on our relationship with the natural world, with the physical material fabric of creation. Let's see where we start with that. Well, I guess we'd start on stewardship, wouldn't we, with Genesis, with the creation commands. Genesis 1:28 gives us a problem straight away, doesn't it? Straight away. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air." That Hebrew word kabash, subdue, what does it mean? Well, literally it's about putting your feet up on a footstool. It's that sort of subdue. It has been used as military language to put your foot on the footstool of the neck of your enemy. But, come back to this, it can also have that earlier meaning. The footstool is about rest. Creation is originally set within, of course, the Sabbath rest. Creation is the place within which you put your feet on the footstool, you subdue it. Insofar as there's any subduing to do as well, it's clear that part of the nature one has to subdue is our own nature of selfishness and exploitation. So far more to dig out there, but I hope we'll be able to reflect back on that in some of the other things that we go on to see. The one takeaway message I want to introduce you to now and finish with is that the theology of stewardship, the biblical theology and philosophy of stewardship, is fundamentally relational. It's about working at a relationship, nor is it a relation that's static in time. It's a relationship that needs mending. It needs to move from a broken past to a healed future. That's what this is about. Let's see how that works out. Those of you who know me will know that no one escapes even 4 or 5 minutes from me on creation without visiting the book of Job. So we're going to visit the book of Job. Job, the biblical book par excellence, whose poetry is saturated with material world. Let's jump straight into the dialogues. Job's suffering, he's on his ash heap. His so-called friends have started their dialogues with him, accusing him of sin because they can't see any other reason that he might be suffering. And Eliphaz lets out, in the midst of his banal and superficial accusations, out comes a little bit of truth. This is Job 5:22. Eliphaz is talking about when Job is finally right. He's obviously out of order with creation. He's suffering. He's lost all his material wealth. His flesh is rotting on his bones. It's quite disgusting. But Eliphaz points to a time of reconciliation. In verse 22, "You will," he says, "laugh at destruction and famine. You need not fear the beasts of the earth, for you will be in covenant with the stones of the field, and the wild animals will be at peace with you." Now that covenant again, Hebrew, berit, really is the Hebrew word for covenant. Many translators have just withdrawn in fear from translating it that way, because the covenant is the highest of all relationships. One has a covenant with God. Kings have covenants with each other. You don't have a covenant with a stone. But here in Job you do. But not now, later, when all is fulfilled, when that relationship, which is currently broken and agonized, nature hurts human beings hurt nature. It's a broken pathological relationship, but there is a time when the working out of salvation heals not just our relationship with God, but the subsequent, consequent relationship of us with nature. And that looks like covenant too. What about the New Testament? How does Paul put it in his magnum opus, his greatest exposition of the gospel? I'm talking, of course, about the letter to the Romans. At the pivotal point of that letter, when he's finished his Abrahamic theology of redemption and salvation, he's just about to go on to his main topic of what happens to the Jews, and he gets there by gazing at this relationship of under God, of humans and creation. Let's read Romans 8:19. The creation, cosmos is the Greek here, waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but the will of the one who subjected it, in the hope that creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and be brought into the freedom of the glory of, I'm changing the translation to be more like the Greek here, of the children of God. Creation itself comes into its rightful, healed, unbroken state when its relationship with humankind is right. And Paul nails it later on when he writes in his most empathetic letters of all to the Corinthians, when he talks about this ministry of reconciliation. Final biblical visit, 2 Corinthians 5:19. God was, famous verse, God was reconciling the world, cosmos again, to himself in Christ. Everything. Not counting men's sins against, old translation, not counting humans' sins against them. And he has committed to us the message of reconciliation, the message of reconciliation. Now, of course, the core work of reconciliation is Christ's work of reconciliation, humankind with God, and our reconciling to each other, Gentile and Jew, slave and free, male and female, all those divisions and splinters that come from fallen, selfish humanity are reconciled. But there's another relationship that needs reconciling and healing. It's our relationship with nature. And it follows this biblical story. It bears the hall print of any classic broken relationship. What's that? Bad relationship starts with ignorance, where it should be knowledge. Two people have a bad relationship because they don't really understand each other. That knowledge leads, instead of moving on together, it says to fear. The lack of knowledge leads to fear. We fear the wild animals. Remember, we have a fear of nature. Nature, now we learn, if nature could fear, had everything to fear from humankind and how much we can damage the natural world. So ignorance, fear, and harm, mutual harm. Classic broken pathological relationship. How do you treat relationships like that? Well, you start at the beginning. You have to replace ignorance by knowledge. Well, that's what science does, in my view. The reason we need to know things about nature is because ignorance leads to fear and harm, whereas knowledge leads to the next stage, which is wisdom. It's a wisdom in giving and taking, in understanding each other, and so that from knowledge to wisdom, we can finally lead to a mutual fruitfulness rather than mutual harm. So that's the three-stage story of biblical stewardship and the theological narrative that underpins it, of moving from a fallen, broken relationship with the natural world, which is consequent on our selfish disobedience to God, through the salvation released by Christ, who, of course, was there in material creation at the first, Colossians, go and look that up, to take our broken relationship of ignorance onto knowledge, which then replaces fear with wisdom. and harm by fruitful stewardship. Okay, so that was, again, if you want to look them up, Genesis 1:28, Job 5:22, and visit the Lord's answer to Job if you want to read more about the relationship to the natural world in Job 38. Romans 8 all the way through, that was particularly verse 19. 2 Corinthians 5, the whole chapter is good. That was verse 19 too. And I'd be very happy to receive thoughts and questions from you if you have them. And again, congratulations. I wish you all the best for your project.